Welcome back to the Deviant Duo. We're back for another week. We haven't been cancelled, supposedly, and we've got another guest on today. So, Dax, how have you been doing?
I've been doing all right, apart from, stressed out by not about life and stuff. But yeah, I'm doing good. How are you doing, Quincy?
I'm doing all right. I'm a bit under the weather today for this recording, but we're going to carry through. We're going to persevere.
That's a vibe.
So, we've got a guest on today. This guest is actually from further away than we normally do. Ooh. This guest is all the way from America. We've stolen them for however long this is going to go on, and I've chatted to them for a long while. They're a handler, Dax.
Ooh. Handler.
So you got two handlers in the podcast today, so good luck. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce them. Their name is Chipper. Do you want to do the rest of your intro? Because there's a lot of titles after your name, isn't there?
Oh, I don't know about all that. I was Northeast Handler 2023, International Trainer 2024. I'm an educator, a producer, a coach, an advisor, and a consultant. I work almost exclusively in kink, fetish, and sex these days, which is pretty cool. And I run the account Follow Chipper on Instagram and TikTok, where I talk about relationships, sex, kink, dynamics, anything that kind of is a part of my life, which is a very deviant one.
Ooh, look at this. Already pro mode.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Pro mode, said the name, everything.
So yeah, you've got quite a full-on kind of barrage of things that you do then, if you're doing all of that. How did you kind of get started with that?
Well, started with that.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. And I have the unfortunate or fortunate burden of being an overachiever generally. Each of those things started at different moments for me. It wasn't like everything just happened suddenly. Ever relate to myself as a kinkster when I was younger, partially because I just didn't have the vocabulary to really understand what it was. I'm from a very small city, originally in the Bahamas, Nassau, and it's very conservative. And so there wasn't really kink on display. And it's also a pretty homophobic place. So even just being gay and trying to have fun sex was a challenge in itself. But when I got older, I kind of looked back and I was like, oh, I actually am kind of like a kinky fucker. And so most of my kink life was when I kind of realized that I was into things that were a little out of the box from a vanilla sense. I explored those things in private largely. And it wasn't until in 2019 when I got sober that I had to kind of recontextualize my sex life. Up to that point, so much of my play involved substances. I'm a former meth addict, and that really impacted my ability to have healthy, normal dynamics and relationships outside of intense chem play. And so when I got sober, I was like, okay, what does it mean to be a kinkster, or to be sexually expressed in the light, I'll say, because I spent so much time just being in hotel rooms or junky kind of trap houses for days where the blinds are covered and, it's very seedy. That got me connected to the kink community, my recovery. And so in 2019 into 2020 is when I kind of started exploring the scene more. Being an overachiever, I quickly saw a lot of ways that the community, there were a lot of gaps, because also that was the time that COVID hit, right? And so the scene is being disrupted in so many ways. And so coming out of COVID, everyone kind of seemed in this haze, and some of the events that predated COVID kind of fell apart. Some were struggling to come back together. There was quite a bit of drama in the New York pet play scene at the time, kind of responding to the need for a broader, more accepting community. There was an event that was held at the Eagle prior to that, a monthly kind of mosh and social and play. But that event wasn't extremely friendly to like trans and non-binary folks. It was very, yeah, just very limited to like a very particular type of body and person. And coming out of that, like, Gotham Kennel Club formed as a response to that here in New York, which I'm not a part of, but that's the event I started going to. I also started connecting to other party spaces and types of events. Like Pet Play was like my social introduction into the scene, but I quickly kind of like started hanging out with like fisters and water sports guys and, like other kind of facets of my proclivities. People were like so hungry for contact and there wasn't a lot going on. I wanted to have as much contact with people as possible and I felt like everyone else did too. And so I saw a vacancy and I was like, let me start just kind of organizing some really casual socials. And I started hosting Pet Park, which is just like a weekly social in the summers, escalated into other projects. Like I have a art history background and curatorial background. So I started organizing like a monthly gathering for critters where called Cultured Pets. We'd go to brunch, we'd go to like a museum or like a gallery crawl, then we'd go for like a walk in a park. Like it was kind of like a
Ooh.
Saturday afternoon brunch hang and see some art. And all of these things were like a lot of fun and I enjoyed doing. Like there were things that I liked and I felt like people like really really rallied around those events. And they've become kind of staples. Like this summer is the 5th year of Pet Park, which is really cool. And it was around that time that Raptor, who was the at that time he was the Northeast handler, and he really encouraged me to run for that role. And at the time, I was kind of conflicted. I primarily identified as a puppy at that time, which is kind of like I've lost that side of myself over the years. He just thought I was doing so much community work already that it just made sense for me to run. I was really curious about getting more involved with handling and dominance. When I was younger, I was a submissive primarily. And as I got older, that role started changing. Some of that started to happen to me, I feel. I definitely get called daddy all the time. and
Yeah.
and people started to view me differently and the relationship, my kind of sexual sense of self started to adapt and change as people started to view and interact with my aging, my sense of security also because as I mentioned with my substance use background, it was much easier to be a submissive when I'm like high out of my mind and just like letting people do whatever they want to me. But being sober and kind of reclaiming a part of agency within the kind of play I was having, dominance started to become more attractive to me because I felt like I could control the situations a lot more. I was kind of learning how to be an adult in a way and learning how to care for things. And, that just started with like, I remember like caring for plants, was a big deal for me. Like, oh my God, my plants aren't dying. Like I could just take care of things. I was doing a lot of service in the recovery community as well. And so like what I was doing was just so wrapped up in service and so wrapped up in what does it look like to care for things outside of myself and to care for myself within that. So it just became like a more natural transition into handling. Ran for Northeast Handler. I won, which was really cool and fun. I enjoyed that experience so much. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Had a great year, traveled a lot throughout the region and continued building those events. The Northeast Pet that year was Rexy, and we were very good friends prior to us running. And we were kind of like a great duo throughout that year. And something that we were craving was like a proper play party. At that moment, all of the events we were doing and other people were doing were socials, and kind of opportunities for people to get together. But there wasn't a regular mosh in New York at that time. There also wasn't any space. It's like all the sex got pulled out of it. It just
Mm.
became like identity and socializing and this kind of like playfulness with each other. And so it became like a huge mission of ours to provide a space where people could actually play with one another, whatever that term means, like whether it's just socializing and or whether it's moshing or whether it's like getting down and dirty and doing the deeds.
Yeah.
And so we then developed Unleashed, which is the pet play party that Roxy and I started. It's been going on for 3 years. And Rexy recently moved to Philadelphia and kind of gave the reins fully to me last year. And that's been like a huge hit. Like it's so much fun and it is a great time. It's a dungeon space, there's a maze, like people are fucking and playing, and there's always like some
Ooh.
crazy shenanigans going on. This past party, I'm gonna digress because I feel like y'all would encourage this.
Do it,
You
do it,
know,
do
I
Yeah, absolutely.
I had to clean up milk in the maze is the first time, like actual like cow's milk. Someone
Oh,
brought
okay.
like milk to feed to someone. And I was like, I've never had to clean up literal cow's milk from a sex space before, but that was the first. There's this bunny that comes, and this bunny was playing with someone and they were like fisting each other, like 69 fisting one another with their like hoods on and eating arugula while doing this, just like, and it was like, I was like, this is so bizarre and beautiful and I love it. And so Unleashed gets like a lot of like wacky, interesting interconnections between like the headspace play with other types of kink. And yeah, so I started doing that. I then ran for international trainer, and that was a really fun experience. I'm very competitive, but I also like to have a lot of fun. And I won that, which was amazing. That year was really difficult for me because I also lost my job right after I won it. I also was getting divorced and I had to move out. And so there was a lot of factors happening in my title year for international that really limited my ability to do the scale of projects and travel that I wanted to do during that year, particularly within the first 6 months. I did get a travel fund, but the travel fund for international is nowhere near what it really needs to be to actually be able to travel internationally on a regular basis. The thing that became clear, because at that point I was also doing coaching, like sex and intimacy coaching, which I've been doing for a few years at that point. It struck me that, the internet is here and this could be an avenue for me to provide information and content and be able to be everywhere in the world at once. And so that worked out really well with me meeting up with who would become one of my pups, Rufus. I was at an event in Puerto Vallarta in Mexico for Pup Days, and which they host every twice a year, like a puppy weekend.
Okay.
And I met Rufus there, and we ended up hitting it off. We developed a dynamic a few months later. He has a lot of experience with social media, and he was like, I really think that this is an avenue you should really explore if you're thinking about it. And he has helped me to build my follow chipper following since then. And so I've answered this question long form to say that none of these things started, they kind of each started like a year or two after one another, like over
Yeah.
the span of about 7 or 8 years. So today it feels my capacity has grown. And so there's a lot to manage at this simultaneously, but it's been a slow growth to get there. But I am also thinking about where I need to pull back from because I also started another party, a leather kink fetish party that last year that is a priority for me. And so, yeah, I have a lot going on. I do a lot within kink and pet play. While all of this is going on, I also work, at leather stores. I worked for Mama Leather, which is a New York based brand. And then when that I left there and started working at the Leatherman New York, which is an iconic store in the West Village, which has been there since 1965. I recently left there and am now consulting with a new fetish shop in Chicago. So, and in conjunction with that, is I work at a dungeon space, like at a play space. And so every
Yeah.
weekend I work parties at those spaces. And so it seems like there's a lot of components, but they're relatively centralized around a few spaces and a few topics.
Yeah, it's interesting that you used to work for Mama Leather because I got a harness in my pup hood from Mama Leather and they seem to have disappeared off the face of the planet now.
Yeah, they actually did. Marco closed down last summer. I actually have all of the inventory from that store.
Oh,
That's
damn.
the inventory that I used to open up my own pop-up here in Bushwick in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And so I have been selling Mama Leather Goods, as well as I have carried other products as well that I've added to that. It's not a huge priority for me. Like it's not a store. It's more of a pop-up, like by
Yeah.
appointment or by open on occasion.
Very nice. I mean, not
So
nice.
you
that
know
it
where to
folded,
get
but
stuff.
Yeah.
Every time Dax has been on this podcast, we've talked about leather. He's like, oh, I used to get this from Mama Leather. I
Yeah,
used to
there
get this from Mama Leather. And then he's like, oh, it's gone. It's gone. And so do you know where to get it now?
Yeah, I do.
Unfortunately, I don't have any more of the pup hoods or ears or anything like that. So that is not an offering I have available at this moment. But if you ever need a colored harness or jock or vest or anything like that, hit me up.
I absolutely will, because I absolutely love my harness, and I definitely think I need more.
Always more.
Just everything bright orange is just fantastic.
Oh, are you a anything goes kind of?
Of course.
Noted.
I love how everyone responds the exact same way when they hear my colors.
I know.
Like, oh, anything. Oh, interesting. Like, yeah.
I'll make a
interesting.
note of that in my black book.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well-
Dax into everything.
Once it's not harmful.
Yes,
you know,
yeah,
but
yeah.
a little heightened blood pressure is not a bad thing in a certain scenario. But it's funny because whenever I think of people in orange, I actually become combative isn't the right word. It's kind of like a playful combative stance, because I always try to find the thing that you're not into, you know, not but like
Yeah.
people who've been orange. I'm like, oh, okay, so you're into anything. And I was like, well, what about this? You know, and I always find something that someone's not into.
I mean, it's always a possibility. It's always like sometimes I don't even know what's going to leave my own mouth, and I'm like, yeah, there we go. That's it.
That's it. Done.
It's true. And it's so funny because like on this social media stuff, it's often the things I don't suspect that people have a problem with. And I'll be like, why do they have a problem with this? Like, that's not even the most like taboo thing I'm into.
Yeah. I've had the same with education, because I've done a bit of education in the past. I think I wrote something last time about wear something comfortable, wear what fits your body, not what people want you to wear. And I nearly got cancelled for that, because the way that I read it was different to how someone else reads it. And then they took offense to it, saying it was body shaming, while I was trying to say, try and make yourself comfortable. I didn't see how it would be received from a personal perspective, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. And this is, you know, one of the things I don't love about digital communication generally, when all the different forms it takes, is that there's so much opportunity for misunderstanding to occur. I have come to learn that people read into what they want to, right? Like they will twist things without realizing it. I'm not blaming them. Like they're coming at their own experience, but they'll hear something and it'll kind of take them to a particular memory or feeling or thought or experience that is specific to them. And then they'll project that onto what they're seeing or hearing or reading. But it can make it complicated to have like real discourse around, because then people are kind of responding from a place of that's very specific to them and also is not really able to be tapped into easily over the internet. And, you know, I also know that being on social media and being kind of very public about my kink world, that a part of that role, and I really think leadership, I'm just going to rewind. I think leadership also suffers from this and is responsible for this, which is that I know that I am being projected on, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's a part of the role of being visible, is that people need the boogeyman sometimes, right? And they can like me, they could agree with some of my things, they could disagree with others, but they need an object in which to reflect their experience. And sometimes that reflection is not positive. And I have to be able to say, like, I know that this person isn't coming for me. Like they're having an experience and they're absorbing what I have said in a way that has impacted them. And that's like a part of like the role of being public. And I think being in leadership, because
It's not an issue, but I think an observation that I've recognized is that a lot of us come with trauma. generally before coming into scene, but we've all got a lot of trauma. We're all queer or LGBT in some way. And a lot of our kinks are sometimes built on trauma as well. And then when trying to have discourse that can really bring up trauma, or education that can bring up trauma, how do we have conversations and ensure that everyone can get involved? We don't re-invoke this trauma and we can have a healthy discourse. And I think that's something that I've recognized, but I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I agree with you. I think that I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay. It's okay. We've all been there.
I don't believe in safe spaces. And what I mean by that is I believe in creating a space that is as safe as possible and creating as much. And for me, what that means is that there's accountability and there's structures in place that can allow for actions to be taken. And so I believe in creating as much structure as we possibly can to make any space as safe as it can be, because we are all coming to anything with our imperfect selves and our experiences. However, I think that there's a degree of understanding that there's no such thing as we're all going to get along, we're all going to see eye to eye, we're not going to be triggered by this kind of discourse, because there's an expectation that there is going to be conflict. And it's not about saying that anyone's ignoring anyone's conflict, but it's also about how do we actually bring the conflict in and how do we sit with the conflict, right? And that's really, really uncomfortable and difficult to do. And something I think that I see more prevalently today than, say, 10 years ago, and I think a part of this might be, I'm not a social scientist, to do with the internet, is that people find it harder to sit in discomfort and find it harder to find compromise within discomfort and disagreement. And so that, makes it difficult sometimes to have a really robust discourse, because really, I think what we need is a space that's non-judgmental,
Yeah.
a space where people could say what they want to say, being afraid of being canceled, like what we were joking about earlier, without afraid of being pushed out or thought of differently. It's hard to do because people come with such trauma to these things, and they're serious. These are not light issues. But to be able to exist, like in my dream world, like to be able to have some kind of gathering where people could actually just say what's on their mind. But I think that's the way that we develop tools in order to address the problem. I really feel like there's an elephant in the room that we don't talk about because we're so concerned of like how we're going to be perceived, whether that's on the internet. Social media has made us so interconnected that it's so easy for me to suddenly get involved with some drama that's happening in Australia. That I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not a
Yeah.
part of that community. And to be clear, I'm not saying that I don't think that people shouldn't be held accountable when there are terrible things that happen. I
Yeah.
am not saying that I support transphobia or racism or ableism. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that. There's very little grace,
Yeah.
and compassion, I think, in the scene sometimes.
Just touch upon a few things there is that I think just finishing on what you were saying is that I found that if you start isolating people and you you cancel people and say you're transphobic and you just isolate them, what often happens with those individuals is they'll find a niche where their views are more accepted. And then what they do is they often fester, and then they get these views and they become stronger and stronger. And then often you've then not allowed, but you've sort of facilitated in someone to become radicalized in their opinion. And sometimes, I know it's very hard, but sometimes we need to sort of go and actually have those hard conversations with those people and say, why do you believe those views? That I might get cancelled for that opinion, but I think we sometimes do remove conversations, and it often exacerbates issues down the line. I don't know if you think the same, Chipper. I don't know if you want to comment on that one.
Yeah, I know I agree with you. I mean, maybe this is the podcast where we're all going to get canceled. being a recovering addict, there are several incidents here in the US where people really got dragged through the mud and they did terrible things. I'm not going to pretend like they were some great members of the community, but things that are extremely problematic and that they need to be some kind of reprimand or protection around. But in so many cases, my first thought would be, are they suffering from substance abuse? And in many cases, if not all of them, because I don't know all of them 100%, they were. I was like, oh, that's so interesting because I know from my experience, as well as people I was in contact with when I was actively using, it is a dark space to be. Like
Yeah.
chemsex spaces, you push the boundary more and you really are in an addictive cycle that, the level of paranoia, the level of psychosis, like, there's so many things that can happen where you become such a shadow version of yourself. And so in my mind, while some things were happening, like this is like a year and a half ago, and I was like, oh, this person who is being completely ostracized and kicked out of the community and just like shamed in such a public forum is actually someone who's suffering from substance abuse and needs help. I decided to stay out of it because it's such a hard topic to broach when I'm like, yes, this person is a perpetrator, but they're also a victim. How are we, if we're supposed to be kind of like really building a space for community and rehabilitation, restorative justice, these kinds of things, like if we're really thinking about those things seriously, we're really letting people down. Yeah, and that connects to like what you're saying. Like that was my experience with substance abuse is that the more I felt pushed out from certain spaces, I just found people who were like-minded and you just fall deeper and deeper into the thing. And I think with concepts and ideas, it works the same way as you described.
Yeah, I was about to say exactly what you just said at the end. I've got a friend who takes chems for sex, and I hear in the background behind them and, in the spaces when people are chatting, oh, I'm not going to play with them because they take chems. Do you mean? So then this person becomes ostracized from the community because they're doing something that someone thinks is very risky, and they won't chat to them. They won't talk to them because they're doing chems. And then that's a really, from experience, I found that's a really quick way of someone getting really addicted into drugs because they haven't got a support community, and the only community that will support them are other people taking drugs who are often saying, take more, do more. And where's the community in that? Where's the community in that individual where we should have been, I know you're doing this, so let's have a community with all different opinions in it, not just you don't believe what I believe, so bye-bye. Because that just makes people fall into darker spaces, I'd say.
Exactly. And this works on so many levels, not just with substance. I just use that because
Yeah.
it's like my immediate experience that I have a very visceral connection with. And I've seen it happen,
Yeah.
And I think with ideas around how we exist and coexist as Kinksters and in community, the same kind of isolation can occur. And isolation is just like the worst component of festering kind of negative, more extreme thoughts and feelings.
And I was just going to go on, I think it leads quite nicely on something you said is about safe spaces. I detest the word as well. So I'm so happy when someone says, there's no such thing as safe. I'm like, yes, finally, someone's saying it. Because crossing the road, walking down the street, having a shower, nothing's safe. Do you mean? There's always some risk to what you do day to day, and especially in kink as well. So I always use the word risk aware. I think that by calling something safe, we remove that awareness of risk, that we just say, oh, it's a safe space because we've done this and this, but then people don't evaluate risk.
Yeah, exactly. I think the conversation is always about risk. And, we even jokingly and culturally talk about love in a way of risk, right? Of harm and fear of being hurt and unlovability. And so much of so many people's trauma is this kind of like fear of unlovability and what risk goes into that. And kink takes it to another level of which requires such a level of trust and alignment. Yeah, the risks are always present, like whether it's emotional or physical. And you could, I've thought about scenes I've done with people where we did, we checked all the boxes. We discussed in advance like what we were going to do, and something could still happen that causes someone to have a trigger response or an unexpected kind of like factor that, though is not extremely common, in for me it's not been common, it has happened. I think what you're saying about risk, like understanding that everything we're doing has a certain level of risk and anything can kind of happen, and that we're trying to create as many boundaries and guards as possible to have the experiences we want. When people, say to their romantic partners or whatever, like, oh, I'm not going to hurt you. And I just think that's such crap. Whenever I do a negotiation with someone who I am looking at not just as a one off scene, like a pickup scene, but something that's more of a dynamic or a romantic relationship in any way, one of the first things I say is, I will hurt you. Like there's no doubt I am going to hurt you somewhere down this line. I do not intend to, I do not want to, but it will happen because we are people. But I am willing to show up to that. Whatever that repair and discourse looks like when I do hurt you, I hope that you're able to bring it to me and that we can navigate it, because it's always present, and it's a part of the thing that makes kink exciting is that there's risk. At least for me, a part of the risk is like it's titillating. How can we be joyful and have fun while also being realistic about the dangers that are ever present?
I liked how you brought it into relationship, because a lot of people say to me, oh, they're having a struggle in their relationship or they've had an argument and they think it's the end of the world. They've had this argument, it's all blown up and done. That's it. The relationship's over. We've had an argument. We've hurt each other. But I think actually what you just said there is about it's the recourse afterwards. And I would say you only grow through your challenges. And if everything
Absolutely.
was simple and everything was, there was no risk involved or nothing happened, we wouldn't grow. I think that might be also the reason we do kink, is that we grow through the activities we do. We have to grow. And if we don't actually face up to our challenges and overcome them and learn from them, then we're not going to grow. But also, I think that if we don't actually address what's gone on, we can't grow as a community, and that we'll start to become very stagnant because we've got no challenges anymore, because we've got these spaces where we don't talk about challenges, we don't talk about the issues, we don't raise them up how we should do. We just sort of go, bang, I've made a decision, that's it, bye-bye.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really like such a great topic because it starts in the individual and it reflects out into relationships and then community, which is, our relationship. I would say I'm trying to make a connection here between community dysfunction and the relationship of oneself to shadow and perfectionism. Is that when you have a breakdown in a relationship and people are like fearful, like, oh, something's, gone wrong, like you described. I remember the first disagreement that Rufus and I got into. It was so uncomfortable because we had yet to like explore what does it look like for us to have repair. That first kind of like misalignment is always kind of, I think, the worst one. And when we were in repair, and I said, I'm glad this happened, because the more, every time that we have a misalignment or disagreement, the more we actually learn about the other person and the more we learn about ourselves in that process. And if we're not able to see the underbelly of a person and see what someone looks like when they're distraught, when they're angry, when they're saying things that they don't mean but are can be hurtful, that's we're seeing the other person and they're allowing us in to see that. Whenever there's kind of like a disruption, like this is why it's a vulnerability that's being exposed. I think for any like healthy relationship, is like holding that vulnerability for what it is and taking it as information, not judging the person from it, and being able to then accept that as a part of them and accept that they might not even be aware of all of their underlying motivations or experiences, that it is fully a part of them. Like that's the thing that people are so fearful of in relationships about being abandoned or left behind, is like that it's about holding all of that discomfort and having that be visible. And I think as queer people, at least in my generation, you're taught to hide. You're taught to like pretend to be someone else, pretend to fit in. And so you become very good at kind of like fragmenting self. To be the version of yourself in public is one thing, and the version of yourself with yourself is another thing. To be able to have integration, is really the goal. Like that's my goal in life, right? Is to become more and more integrated with my darker and lighter senses of self, where I don't become the best or the worst version. I just become who I am. That's important from a personal level. And it's also important because that's how it functions in community systems too, right? Like going back to like holding the space for someone to be messy, someone to have differing views, to be able to sit through that discomfort and be like, but that doesn't mean that we can't co-organize or coexist in the same space. It's like separating and allowing people to really be who they are. Once there are parameters around harm to others or themselves, then I think that people should be able to like exist. But it goes into like those two things are related, because I think we're really not willing to admit our sense of shadow. And again, going back to like social media, and I'll say for myself, like this is something I have struggled with a bit and has come to light with doing my content. Like people view me as Chipper, and I got that name. It was given to me by my first alpha because I'm very charismatic and optimistic and, like very bubbly, very chipper on the internet. And I try to be a positive force, but that's not all of who I am. And, someone actually from the UK came into the Leatherman a few weeks ago and no, a few months ago, sorry. And he was like, "Oh my God, I follow your content and it's so cool to meet you." And I was like, "Oh yeah, thanks, cool." And when he was leaving, he was like, "You're different than I thought you'd be. You're just like more mellow than I thought you would be or something." And he seemed kind of like disappointed that I wasn't the version of myself that I am in my videos. And I resented that, because I'm like, I'm not that all of the time. And with every, with this version of me that's chipper, that's trying to be an educator, a positive role model, an example, there's also, all of this part of me that's like uh, angry and upset and insecure and fearful and resentful and bitter and, all of these other emotions on the other side of that spectrum that I don't really have the outlet for in the same way. Like I do have therapy and relationships and, I have support systems, but not everyone has those support systems. And I don't always think that that we allow space for the kind of conversation around integration in those ways and the kind of ugly side of who we are.
I'd be fascinated to sit with you again and do the psychology. But I just wanted to get back on just before we move on, is the perfectionism in the community. Because I think this is also why we've done the podcast. And it's really nice that we talk about it. It's sort of why we did the podcast. We just wanted something chaotic, wanted something fun. And we wanted to have the conversations, sometimes the ugly conversations that aren't being had in our community, and not be perfectionist. I recently supported an organization. I was doing a lot of posts, a lot of trying to get education, a lot of community connection out there. And there was maybe one or two issues on one of the posts. And it was like, take it down. We need to be like this ultra corporate professional entity. We can't look like we've done something wrong. And I went, no, I will address the issues. I'll address the comments and I'll say, hold our hands up and be accountable for them. And I'll say, hey, look, here is where you can find it. I'm not going to remove something because there's a few issues. I'd rather educate in the comments and say, and be accountable in the comments rather than removing something and trying to be this perfectionist, because no one's perfect. No community is perfect. No ideal is perfect. And I think we sometimes drive for that perfection. And then, like you said, we sort of lose that subconscious. We're not listening to our subconscious. And I guess in some sense, the community isn't listening to its subconscious. It's not listening to those thoughts that are beneath this layer on maybe social media and the event, you go into an event, that there's this subconscious thoughts that are underneath on the bedrock, which is just bubbling away and no one's really paying attention to. And I guess at some point it's going to blow or break. Do you mean?
Yeah.
And go, okay, there might be issues and let's have those ugly conversations while also having a bit of fun, because that's what the community should be about, in my opinion.
Yeah, there'll always
But
be people who disagree.
but that's what's fun. That's
Yeah.
what's fun. That's what
Yeah.
makes it fun, though, because if people agreed all the time, it would be fucking boring.
Absolutely. Yeah. Discourse can be fun, but it requires like being able to separate or put on hold. Like sometimes when I'm interacting with people, particularly from a more professional standpoint, like if someone's talking to me about something they're going through or something they'd like to achieve within a kink practice, but is this the moment that this conversation I'm having with someone isn't about that? Like I could believe all sorts of things and I can share them in other contexts, but it's about the discourse of what's happening in front of me. And so I have to like separate my own motivations and desires sometimes from like what's the greater good. What's don't let the perfect it was it don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Like last week when Jax and I were talking in Chicago and he kept on saying at IPTC, like anything worth doing is worth doing badly. But that requires like such a level of grace and compassion to say this. Like I think a lot of people are thinking about it and doing it. Like it's not like I don't think that this isn't happening, but we could always use more of, we could use more. And when I see people, particularly newer onto the scene, it's something that I'm just mindful of because I think it's important to kind of focus on what's newer. Because I think, particularly in pet play, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here it skews very young right now. Like there are
Yeah.
many dogs I know in their 40s and 50s, but they're not the ones who are going out to events because events are kind of catered towards a younger audience. So there are a lot of people in some cases, late teens, a lot in their 20s, who are just exploring kink play for the first time. And that makes up like a big bulk of who's showing up and who's like seeking experiences within these contexts.
I was just going to go on the UK scene. I've taken a step back from events over the years, especially pub events. 26, but I've always feel welcome at the events. I've got a different style. I was taught by maybe more of an old guard individual when I started out. Luckily, someone mentored me and was very more old fashioned in the way that they saw kink, not in the new style. And they're very much wear this or this is the protocol and, all these sorts of things. So nowadays I feel a little bit more separate from the spaces. I'm not that old, but I do feel separate. I don't know how you feel, Dax, how you feel about events now, going to them as a pup.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually do that many UK events, as you know, because where I am, there's basically none that happen. So the events that I have done, they've been fairly welcoming, but again, there's definitely they feel very cliquey.
So you're so used to hanging around with people your age that it just becomes very cliquey, not because I think they want to do it. I think that's just what you're grown up to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, cliques at events are always going to be a thing, and you can't force people to not hang out with who they want to
Yeah.
hang out
Yeah.
with. But I think it's what makes the difference of having people. I like to think of it in these terms. There are events I go to that are there to feed me, who I am as a
Yeah.
kinkster and a person, and there are events I go to where I'm there to be of service. In the latter, the being of service is being able to branch out of just like who I'm friends with already and welcome new people or a kind of community source by being present. And, community requires that kind of back and forth of like, we need to be fed in it because it's very easy, particularly from an organizer perspective, to never be fed. I do a lot of events, I do a lot of stuff, and I rarely go to something that's just for pleasure. But it's important to have that balance. And I think people, for the most part, understand that. But yeah, when it's a younger crowd, like you're saying, like they're exploring it differently, and it's very different than how I grew up as well. Like, though there wasn't a kink scene where I'm from, I was like, man, I wish I had these parties and these socials to go to when I was your age. Like, that's so wild to me that you're this age and able to, like, there's some people I know who are like 23 and they're like fisting experts. And I was just like, whoa, this 20 years ago, this is not the case,
Yeah.
I wish I had the balls to do it as well. Do you mean like it takes some
yeah.
balls to do it, to go out that age and go, I know what I want and that's what I'm going to do? It takes some balls.
Yeah, and it's kink has become more mainstream over the years and more acceptable in popular culture, and that's amazing. Like, I think this is all really cool and really great. All of this stuff and younger people being able to explore these scenes and spaces, I completely support. I think it's so cool, and there's so much opportunity for education and insight and exploration. It's really cool. But when I was growing up in the scene, like, there's a lot of trial and error, a lot of showing up uncomfortable and shy and scared as a young person into spaces where most people were much older than me, and having some really great experiences and having some like really terrible ones. And so I had to like navigate it differently because there was so much more responsibility on me when I was younger, to move through those spaces, and there was so much less discourse on risk awareness, on consent. It's not that consent didn't exist, but when I was sexually active, God, 23 years ago, it was not the same scene. And so I had to learn lessons a different way. And I think it's really cool where we're at today. Yeah, it's just like I'm starting to feel the age difference and my own relevance sometimes to that experience. And um I didn't have resources when I was really young, and now there's so many resources and I can direct people to those resources. But I guess I'm trying to get it at like a little bit of, there's a detachment, there's like a
Well, but I sort of get you don't. There's a lack of connection to what you're not at the same pace or same energy or the same level as others, and sometimes trying to connect to that level, you've got to take yourself back. And I think for for me, sometimes going backwards, I feel a challenge because I feel like to try and go backwards to try and connect with them, I feel that I'm going backwards on myself, that I should be continually going forwards.
yeah, thank you for that. I think you actually touched on the thread, which is that back and forth, that if I'm playing with someone, I want to have a good time. And so I'm willing to like be more of a teacher, in certain ways. If there's someone who I want to play with and have a good time with, and I'm willing to do that in a certain context. But yeah, what you're describing is definitely something I experience from a public facing position. When I'm thinking of content to talk about or lessons I think that would be useful for whatever my public is, it's sometimes kind of difficult because Rufus will tell me all the time when I'm brainstorming ideas, and he'll be like, you're jumping too far ahead. Like, you're too advanced in what you're talking about. Like, it's not going to translate on social media. It's not going to translate in a 60 to 90-second video. It's not the things that I'm actually really like. I'm passionate about people having a good time and exploring their sexuality and doing it in a way that's healthy for them. Like, I am passionate about that is a broad, overarching position. But the things that really get me excited, you know, are usually extremely niche, very specific, are very geared towards my own interests, and I don't always feel like I can really talk about those things in a public space because that's not where most of my public is at or wants to hear. And so I do feel, and I feel this in community kind of context too, when I'm at events, it's almost easier for me to I'm just going to be a busybody working because then I'm kind of distracted into that rather than having to have these sometimes forceful connections, like that feel forced. They don't always come as easily to me. And a part of that is like my experience in kink, but in pet play in specific, has evolved quite a bit. And, for me, it's sexual today. I want to be fucking, I want a good boy who is going to do what I said and clean my feet and lick up my armpits and get my musk all over them and give them some spanks, and I'm going to treat them to a bone afterwards. But the that's the context that I'm relating to that kind of play. And so, like, even when I was running for my titles, I made it very clear, like, I do not relate to myself as a community handler. I have handled people in community contexts. I've overseen moshes and encouraged, critters to play and played with them and things like that. And so, but I see that for me, because it has like a more intimate sexual kind of component, it's not a title I've ever felt like comfortable using because the play is just different for me. And there's so many people within the pet play scene who it's less sexual and more identity based and social. And it can cross into sexual, but it's very specific. And so, yeah, like it's kind of where I am in it. And these days I'm much more attracted to the power dynamics, which are a little more old school. I I don't know how I've ended up with three brats, but I have. uh, and I want to make clear that I don't think that pups and handlers are automatically like a dom sub. Not you can be a dominant pup, you can be a submissive handler, blah blah blah. Like I'm not saying that they're the same thing. For me, they happen to overlap a lot. I want someone who's going to like follow protocol, who's going to be a good boy. I'm very punishment oriented because it's fun for me. I do give rewards, of course, but I make jokes with people all the time. Like, I'm not going to give you a treat because you didn't do anything. Like, I don't think so. You got to earn that treat. I'm not the kind of handler who's everyone gets a prize and for showing up. And I'm attracted to seeing a pop or a sub, attracted to people who have that cross section, who are able to follow rules, follow instruction. That's attractive to me. It makes me excited. There's so much of the stray dog and kind of more of a loose relationship, particularly in pet play, to I think BDSM traditions that is completely fine. Like I'm not critiquing people who are doing that, but it is different than what I'm seeking and doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to go on to the deviant section of our podcast because I think we've covered so much in your intro. I'm like, I want to get going, I want to keep going, but we've got to keep moving on. I think something that I want to talk more about is you've talked a lot about, and just now about power exchange. It's not going to be our topic for Deviant Download, but it'd be nice to hear a bit more about that. And I was just saying, well, what is something that changed how you viewed power exchange?
Yeah. I mean, there was a couple of, there's been so much, like it's an ever evolving, changing thing. I think, something for me that was really transformational was being able to be taken care of. I had always, up until my early 30s, I'd not had a dynamic, like an ongoing dynamic with anyone. Like everything was kind of pick up or scene play. And as a submissive, for me, I was drawn to what it would look like to be a dominant. I was so intrigued by the idea of being serviced. And so change my overall view of power dynamics, but just my personal kind of shift to be like, I also want to be serviced. I want to be cared for. There was something in there for me about actually showing up for myself in a certain kind of way that looked different than it had in the past. And, I'm actually a switch, but I just don't sub any as much as I used to. And for me, I realized, and maybe I'm projecting on other people, that there was a relationship I had because of certain life experiences where I had conflated submission with certain kinds of belief systems about myself. I, being from the Bahamas, I It's a majority black country. I was like this gay little twink who was very bold, and I
Was
would go
she
to gay
effeminate?
clubs.
Was she
Oh,
effeminate?
girl. I wasn't the biggest sissy in the world, but
Did she
everyone knew.
paint her nails? Did she paint
Of
her
course.
nails? Yeah.
So I used to go into these contexts. I used to go into these contexts where I was like this, this young twink, effeminate gay kid, and I was white, and I would be the only white person at these spaces. And there's a lot of down low culture, and there was a lot of like racial power things happening within those spaces as well. And so it's not that I only exclusively bottomed until I was 27. Um, and the reason for that was because I was kind of told that because I'm effeminate, I'm like this effeminate little white boy, that I'm a bottom, And so people didn't really want me to top. I was kind of like the feminine counterpart to like this kind of black masculinity. And that's the kind of context that I became sexually active. I was kind of told I was a sub more than like I felt like a sub, and I expressed it as a choice. I didn't have as much agency at the time in kind of like defining that. And it took me so many years to kind of like backtrack that, right? Because of my external appearance and behavior. And and so for me to kind of like deconstruct that a bit and be like, I do like being a sub, but that's not all I am. And I want this other thing too. And that I can get it was like a huge transformational moment for me. And that's when I started exploring being a dominant. Now, since I've explored domination, I spent years kind of trying to prove to myself that I can be a dominant. The big shift I had is that it's not, it's both performance and not performance. Like when that clicked, I kind of like I felt a sense of self. Like I started to realize that because I also look the way I look, right? Like I'm 6'2", I'm, 195 pounds, which probably means nothing to y'all, these measurements. I'm bearded, I'm hairy, like I've always been labeled this kind of like rugged, attractive, white trash kind of figure.
So for
And
Dax, you're his perfect type, a rugged daddy.
Yep.
yeah.
Absolutely. All I'm hearing is delicious. Absolute meal.
If only you could smell me right now. So I look the way I do. I'm still like a complete faggot, but some people would describe me as trade. and but because of that, I'm exploring dominance. I look the way I am. And then there's this other round of assumptions I had to like debunk, right? And so people like would look at me like, like pups or subs or whatever and be like, oh, you're gonna be like this. You're gonna be this fantasy version of like a rough daddy, who's like trailer park trash. And so there was a projection happening on me. And I was kind of trying to meet that projection through my dominance. And I found that it just wasn't aligned. Like, I was trying to perform dominance in a way that actually wasn't like what I'd seen other people do and what I thought dominance looked like. And then a few years ago, there was just like a shift where I'm like, this isn't, sure, it's fun and all in good fun, but it felt too performative. I felt like I wasn't actually receiving the kind of like care and service that I wanted as a dominant. And I kind of transitioned into like more of a soft dom space. And that's what I realized I am. Like for me, I'm not someone who is gonna play some like archetype of what dominance looks like. It's much more subtle, much more within the day. I enjoy like smaller moments of control. I really get off on a much more mental kind of process. Like I've always had a thing for like bureaucracy. And like I used to make jokes that I want, like people would say, like, oh my God, you're such a cult leader. Like I have cult leader energy. And I'd be like, I'd love to start a cult. And but my cult would be all about like an annoying bureaucracy where
What would
people
be
could
the
pretty much
name of the cult? That's what I'm
I'm
thinking now.
not
What would be the name of the cult? Come on.
I'll think on that one. I don't know. Well, what I used to say? Well, my ex account used to be Chipper School for Boys. what was attractive to this idea was that people could do whatever they want. Like if they want to fuck each other, if they want to do all sorts of whatever terrible things to each other, I don't really care. I'm going to stay out of it, but they have to submit paperwork, because it has to just be approved by me. Like that's all I needed. Like I didn't need to be the one executing anything. I didn't need to be the one doing all the labor, because when I was first exploring domination, I was like, oh, I really have to get on my skills. Like how are my impact skills? How are my fisting skills? How are my skills in like framing a scene? But once I kind of got somewhat of a hang of like what that looked like, I kind of took it away from the physical activities. And for me, it's so much more about like the approval process. I love when I'll go to like take a pup to a sex party and I'll be like, you're gonna be like a fucking cum dump. I want you to be a complete
Yeah.
whore. I want you to collect as many loads as you can, and then you're gonna sit on my face and feed them to me at the end of the night. But every single person that plays with you has to get my permission. You either have to come to me, you have to like carry them over to me and ask for permission, or have them ask for my permission to fuck you and breed you. And so that's more like my style of where I could just be sitting back and doing nothing the whole time, and then just feasting on some bunch of random dudes' loads at the end of the night, which is great for me. But
All I can see is a very British view of you. And it's maybe because I'm British, just sitting there with like an afternoon tea selection, a cup of tea, and just sitting at the table. Everyone's having sex around you. You've just got this cup of tea, your pinky's out, and you're just watching. And then these boys are coming up to you and asking for permission. And you're just like, let me finish my tea, or let me finish my cake. Oh, yes, you can play. And then go back to your cup of tea, pinky out, and just being so gay.
I love that image. I like to get down and dirty too. So I'm not exactly just sitting there doing nothing. For me, it's about getting the permission, the submissive respecting the boundary that's there, him having to check in with me. I get to check in with him each time he has to come to me to do this. There's like so much ease built into that simplicity. Like it's a kind of possession, but not a possession in like a toxic kind of way, a possession in like an erotically charged way that I just love. And for me, it's like that shift of moving away from acts, what we kind of view as like traditional kinky kind of acts, into more of a power headspace was the shift that has like gotten me where I'm at now and what I enjoy the most. Not for extended periods of time, but just as kind of like simple service but there's like an ease. I guess that's what I'm getting at. I'm kind of rambling, but I'm getting at the kind of transition from like the early play with dominance, understanding frameworks, understanding the skills of acts, and then moving into a more headspace oriented, I want to be taken care of, and we're both receiving pleasure from this. But that also requires a degree of trust with the person that they're able to communicate. Because something I really am not about is subs who cannot say what they want and need and what their boundaries are. I'm really not about that.
Yeah. I think me and Dax are fanning ourselves at the moment. We're both getting flustered. Very hot. Got very hot.
A tin of butter cookies so that I can gently munch on them so that I can distract myself.
Distract from the horn. I just wanted to get on, I think I'm just getting onto the topic. And it's one of my next questions I was going to ask is, there are a lot of people who think power dynamics is very much blind submission, that if you're the pup, sub, or bottom, it means that you have to do what the dom says. But a lot of your education and what you've spoken to us beforehand when we've done the pre-thing, you sort of said it is not blind obedience and it's about feeling safe, excited. How do you get people to understand that?
How do I get people to understand that?
Yeah, because obviously it's such an idea in everyone's mind, especially when we've talked about new people coming in, and we've talked even with some experienced people, they do sometimes think it's just, I have to do what the dom says. That's it.
Yeah, no, it's true. And that's like, as someone who subs, like you want to be that thing. You want to be like good, or you want to be bad by epically failing
Being a
by
brat.
being good. but I am not a brat when I'm a sub, just to be clear. But the
Boo.
I'm good. And it can be challenging because pop culture has so many conceptions of what dominance looks like. Like I've not watched Pillion yet, everyone talked about it and I was supposed to
Oh.
watch it to do like a live stream on it and I can't really speak to it, but it's gotten a lot of conversation around what's toxic, what's not, what's forced, what's not. But the reality is that's like the kind of like in the popular imagination. And even with people who I know in the scene who have experience in certain ways, can still struggle with power dynamics. And for me, I view meeting, if I'm playing with a sub pop, whatever, anyone, I need them to meet me as equals. I, even when I'm on an app, like if I'm on Sniffies or something, and I'm flirtatiously playing with someone. I get a lot of people being like, "Hey, daddy, can you come spit in my mouth and do whatever?" And I was like, I'll engage it because it's arousing and it's hot, but it always has to become a certain point where I'm like, okay, so that's great, we're gonna do that, but X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Where are the boundaries? What's okay? This is what I want right now. Because that's something people also don't think about, like in that kind of play, when you want to like bring kink into like hookups is that just because someone's into something generally doesn't mean that they're into it at this exact moment. And so, like, what's on the table for this exact moment and how that's going to look. And I test people a lot. Like, I ask questions around their boundaries to know, like what their knowledge base is and what they're capable of communicating and not communicating. Because I have found that most people do not know how to actually as in a submissive headspace do not know how to actually pull themselves out of it or to like they don't want to say the thing and they don't want to say whatever the word or do the action or do the behavior that we discussed. They want to be as submissive as possible and so they believe that they just have to like do this blind obedience. And if I sense someone's doing that, that's often like I'll continue the scene and I'll end or check in. But it's very rare I'll go back to play with that person because I, it's, what am I trying to get at?
It's like trust,
He-
isn't it? Sometimes
yeah, it's
it's
headspace is
knowing.
headspace.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry for cutting you off, but like it's
Right.
different than how we function through the world, and I think being able to separate that, like I do not do total power exchange, right? Like, so I am not an expert on total power exchange. It's not how I do any of my dynamics
We
with my life.
we've done that one. We've done that one.
Yeah.
Don't worry. We've already done a
Not going there.
podcast on TPE. We
Not going
learnt.
there.
We learnt what it was. We thought it was thermoplastic elastic. We learnt that it was total power exchange. We've done our education on that one.
Good. And so for me, when I'm negotiating, when I'm hanging out, when I'm doing aftercare and post aftercare, we need to be like people meeting each other as peers. And I view people I play with, particularly like not especially, just like subs included, as my peers. And people want to stay in headspace so much and they want to kind of live the fantasy component of it. And it worries me. And that's why I think it's easy to fall down this path because it's so seductive, right? To maintain a kind of headspace ongoingly. And I'm not referring to like if someone asks what they want to be called and they call me daddy and I call them boy or fag or whatever it is we decide, like I'm fine with that continuing even outside of play space, but I need you to be able to meet me as a person, and there needs to be a way to like step out of the power in order to check in as people because the trust you just like that you said just now is so crucially important. And it's so easy to harm someone. It is so easy to create harm that I'm very, very cautious of doing that. I have had so many experiences throughout my life as a submissive where I had a great time at the time. And then years later, I like reflect if something, it sat differently as I learned more, as I grew. And I would look back at something and be like, yeah, that was a lot of fun but he kind of took advantage of me in a certain way or you know what I mean or I would start to evaluate even positive experience I have. I would realize years later that I had these like lingering kind of components that were they detrimental to me in some major way? No, but they affected me, you know? And so I think being a dominant comes with like a lot of responsibility, but I also think it's unfair for submissives to put all responsibility on the dominant. And I just don't think that's realistic. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it leads to healthy long term dynamics. And additionally, it goes to this other idea, which I have been thinking about a lot more, particularly because of people who've been reaching out to me through my page and the kind of comments and feedback I get about some of the posts I make, this correlation with being a victim, you know, submission and victimhood. And that's like a dangerous parallel to make for me. Sure, there are a lot of submissives who have had negative experiences. I've been there as a submissive and where I felt like a victim at a certain point, you know? So I'm not saying that that's not possible and that I see where they cross sect, but there's this belief in a lot of the more mainstream spaces that there is a tighter, like people don't frame it as like a sub is a victim, but the way in which the questions, the kind of thinking are articulated point to that. You know, it points to because they're susceptible to harm, the dominant has all responsibility as though it's a parental relationship. And I am not anyone's parent. I'm a peer. And I don't think I answered your question at all.
That's fine.
Absolutely fine. Look, I say the show's going to be chaotic. We might go and say one thing and it's going to go totally down a different path. But to be honest, you gave some really good insights. And I think you got some key features of what people perceive and what you feel. And I think that's enough of a context to try and show what obedience is and what it's not. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, obedience is a pre-negotiated kind of state of being of service, you know, and receiving pleasure and excitement from that service. But it is something that you want, you know, that is
Yeah.
in its simplest form. Like the thing that I want people to tell me, any kind of sub I play with, is what do you want? And if you say that it's whatever you want that pleases you, then that is such a red flag. Like, I don't think so, you know? Everyone has to have objectives. In my dynamics, like when I have a contract with a sub or a pup, their goals and what they want to achieve and how they want to become a better submissive or a pup or a kinkster is crucial to defining how that power dynamic relationship functions.
Yeah.
I made my last pup write an essay on this topic as a part of his earning his collar.
Oh, but I think we just got the answer then.
Yeah, exactly. I just need to ramble for like 15 minutes to get there.
That's totally fine. I do the same sometimes. We actually got a really complex topic and we're going to try and keep it overview the same as what we're going to do on Instagram. So you'll be able to see after this podcast released our Instagram educational aspect of it. But we're going to be talking about what is consent. It's a very, very big topic, but I want to try and we've got Chipper on here who is an amazing educator and I can't even sum up what you do. You just do so much relationship, so much in the community, everything that you've got such a broad view of what consent can be. And I think that's while we've got you, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Oh God, that was a bit energetic.
Doing this channel.
Now we've got our sound clip for the education. Can we integrate that into my little jingle now? Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's get this going. Let's get this hot.
And consensual.
Of course.
So for me, consent, often when we look at definitions of consent, they're often sexual. It's like sexual consent or consent is the sex or, you know, they always use that word. But I think we need to be aware that consent is not just in a sexual capacity. We've got medical consent, we've got consent day to day, like giving a handshake, a hug. There's a lot about consent that we don't really recognize. And I think it's important to identify that consent doesn't have to be sexual. I think that's the first misconception I think we need to clear up. But for me, consent is ongoing, enthusiastic, and informed. Another way is OMFG, ongoing, mutual, freely given. Chipper, I don't know, how would you define consent short?
I mean, you just did a pretty good job yourself.
Woo. Do you think I could do TikToks? Do you think I could do TikToks?
I think you could do it. I think you're ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said the main components, which is that it's freely given, that it's informed, enthusiastic. A lot of people don't always know what those things mean other than reading them like a play party flyer. So just to kind of like give 2 seconds to expand them, freely given is like, yeah, it's your choice. It's not manipulated. You're just like giving it because you want the activity to happen. And within power dynamics, you know, it's cut that. I'm gonna
You were
try
going to
go
go.
not.
You were going to go on the coercion route, weren't you? Coercion, and I was like,
Yeah.
I was like listening to it, and I was like, yes.
Well, not even because like pressure can like this is why I think it's so important that people have to meet each other as peers within power dynamics, because it's not even like coercion and like someone's intentionally trying to manipulate the situation.
Yeah,
Often it's unknown pressures that are just apparent.
peer
Being,
pressure.
as we talked, yeah, but being even as in a subspace, like we talked about earlier, the sub is more likely to go along with something because they're in a subspace, right? And so
Yeah.
it's that in itself is just automatically a pressure. And so it can't just be like, for me, in a consensual kind of play scene, they like the person might not say what they want, but they might act in a way that shows that they're kind of like not sure about what's about to happen. And then it's important for me, it's my responsibility to check into that. And that's also like a kind of consent check-in, right? Like it's about, are we
Yeah.
good? Is things happening? Are you still okay, even though you're not saying you're okay because you're in a headspace?
And that's the ongoing
I-
aspect, really, isn't it? Is the check-ins, is the ongoing feedback.
Exactly. So pressure can be applied without you even realizing that pressure is applied. And like peer pressure, like you also mentioned, is can be very prevalent. Like this is what I saw someone else do. This is what my friends do. This is what I think it's supposed to be. This is what someone said. And so we hold ourselves to those kind of standards. Being informed, that's a tough one. That's the one where you got to really trust that people know what they're getting into. And not, yeah, you just got to believe that they know what they're getting into. And I actually think that comes with a little bit of additional questioning, not just like, oh, I'm going to do water sports. Or you want to do water sports? Oh, that's so cool. And not just being like, oh, yes, I'm really enthusiastic about doing water sports. That sounds great. I would love to drink your piss. But like, have you done it before? How many times? Can I be, what if I'm high and you're about to drink chem piss? Like, you know, like what? Like there's so many other questions that I think need to go along with the informed consent kind of component. And enthusiastic.
I was just to say that goes really into, I think we'll talk about it set, but the acronyms that we use in kink, such as RAC and PRIC. And we'll obviously go in that more detail, but that's that focus really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the enthusiastic part is just getting, you know, very clear verbal. Yeah, because a lot of times people aren't going to say no, but they also aren't going to say yes, you know? And it's like, unless you get a very clear, yes, we can do this, then it's a no, you know?
Something that I also pick on with enthusiastic, was I think it's also, is their body language still enthusiastic? Do you mean, are they showing me that they're still enthusiastic about what's going on? Yes, you've got an enthusiastic, yes, but are they showing me through body language, through nonverbal communication, are they still enthusiastic about what's going on? That obviously leaks into ongoing, but it is still enthusiastic. Is the body language showing me enthusiasm? When they say yes, and they might enthusiastically say yes, but it's their body saying no. I think there's a lot about body language as well, and how enthusiastic or how relaxed someone is? And does that tell you, are they more or less enthusiastic about something?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that also intertwines with the informed component because, especially if you're doing something a little sadistic, someone might react like, they might be fighting to get out of bondage, or they might, be in like a heightened, their blood's really pumping and they're heightened and they're screaming and, like knowing, making sure the person knows like, this is what it looks like when things are going well. This is what it looks like when things are not going
Yeah.
well. you know,
And that
because
comes with
people
time
react and
sometimes
respond.
as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you have to learning the partner. Yeah.
And
So
then what was the next bit?
I can't remember if there's a next bit. I think I said like
Ongoing, wasn't it? We didn't talk about ongoing,
yeah.
did we?
Well, yeah, reversible, ongoing. It's not just given at one point. Like it's always happening. People can say no at any point throughout play. They can, or like you mentioned, with the body language can change, and that's a moment to stop and check in, to continually make sure that you're on track. And that's helpful from a consent perspective. It's also just helpful from a scene development perspective.
And then I think I'm doing an acronym here, and I don't know if you'll notice which one I'm doing. And the last one is specific.
uh-huh.
Saying yes,
specific, the better.
Yeah. But also it's that because a lot of people, obviously stuff does evolve. Do you mean a scene does evolve? But because they've consented to something then, doesn't mean they consent to something now. But also because they consented to a kiss doesn't mean they've now consented for an Australian kiss, a kiss down under.
And time matters. Time matters with this kind of thing too. Like if you're going to shared play spaces on a regularly occurring basis, giving consent one day to play with someone in a certain way does not mean that you can approach them the next time in the same way.
Yeah.
Unless there's like a clear relationship there, then yeah, that's something I see very prevalently in dungeon spaces and sex parties. Is like, oh, well, I played with you before and it was fine, or people think they have entitlement to access to you because you said yes once before.
And that sort of goes into that reversing and specificity, doesn't it? But it's not directly specific, is it?
No, that's not. That's specific to the time, application of time, but not to the actual acts of what is happening. The more specific, the better. For example, I love water sports, but I really love drinking from the tap. I also love feeding from the tap. I do not like getting peed on. It reminds me of when I used to piss the bed until way too old when I was a kid. And but sometimes I might like it. And you know what I mean? Like what does it look like? What parts of my body can you pee on? When you pee on me, like what does it look like afterwards? What does the aftercare look like? Are we having sex in the aftercare? Are we not? What is the sex? Is it oral? Is it may I touch your genitals while we're doing this kind of play? Where are my genitals? Can I touch you? The more specific the context, the less likelihood for things to go off the rails.
Yeah.
And so that's just always helpful.
Yeah. So out of the two acronyms, OMFG, so ongoing, mutual, freely given, and then we've just gone through FRIES, so freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, specific. Which one do you like the best?
I don't know if I have a preference.
That's fine. Because sometimes I feel that they work mutually together. Do you mean? And some people use one, some people use the other, but I think both of them help. Do you mean?
I think the more information, the better, Yeah. And so I don't use one particular acronym when I'm going through it. I kind of like adapt any particular moment to meeting people where they're at as well within the process. And so it's not like I go, hey, we're about to hang out. Let's do this fries thing. And then I go through each thing specifically. Like it's not as formal in pickup play or something as that. But knowing and being aware of all of them and like what applications apply to the moment as much, And my rule is just like when in doubt, like if you ever feel like something feels off within you at the check-in, that is something to bring up every single time. Even if you think it's stupid or ridiculous. And that goes for kink play, but it also goes for like freezing and hooking up. Like if you're ever in a moment like where the consent is kind of like the lines are more blurred. There's like a cum dump on a rock in a park. If you ever have like an inkling of like asking permission or doing something or checking in, do it. Just do. More information is always better. More clarity is always better.
Yeah. I get a lot of questions on checking in, and a lot of people sometimes find it difficult to check in because they don't want, maybe they're railing someone really hard, and then they don't want to sort of, if the other person's joining, they don't really want to stop and then go, oh, are you okay? Do you mean? And they feel it's going to break the scene, if that makes sense. That's the worry that some people have.
My opinion on this, and this is just might be a bias of style, is how long you reeling someone hard for and how diverse and sensual can you make that experience?
Yeah.
This is just my own take on something like that, which is variety, is really amazing. So like I like to really go in on a boy, but I'm not going to be going in on him for 40 minutes without giving some variety or check in or space. Like it can be quite
Yeah.
sensual and quite easy. You want the whimper, you want the excitement, you want to build the energy. And so integrating that as much as like I do tell people, like if I'm going hard, I can like, when someone's trying to like sneak away like a bottom massage, like you can feel them pulling away from you. And I'm just
Yeah.
like this is a clear sign that something's happening in your body, that even if you as the bottom are like, this is great and I love this, your body is actually telling you no.
Yeah.
And so like in an instance like that, it'd be like, hey, I like put my weight on their body. I'll like, give them my beard a little brush by their face and just do like a simple like, how are you doing? Like, how are things going? Do you need a break? Do you need something else? Do you want more dick? Whatever. It's just like, I think the complaint of like that it ruins the scene is just like a lack of practice and style. I think, of being able to like diversify like what an experience looks like.
But I think you touched on it there, but it's understanding the body language. Like you're not breaking the scene, because if someone's body is saying no, it's really important to check in on them, and because they're probably not recognizing it. And actually it's going to make a better scene and a better connection between you and whoever you're with by actually going, oh, actually, I'm just going to, you can seductively check in. You can go, oh, are you liking me railing you? Do you mean?
Yeah.
You can do it in ways that keeps the scene going, but it's not, oh, how are you? It's just practicing those communication skills. I think traffic light system. Do you ever use a traffic light system?
I do for parties. I don't tend to use it so much I have used it in my own play, but it's a good system to have,
Yeah.
Like all the parties I promote, that's our kind of like default. If anyone doesn't have like a safe words pre-planned on what to do. We also use like coded bands and stuff for some of them around consent and touching.
Do you want to explain the traffic light system? Because obviously some people might not know what the traffic light is and the safe words.
Yeah, totally. So it's like green, red, or green, yellow, red. Green is like, if it's like a band or something, it's usually like you can touch me, you can engage me. I'm good, things are green, I'll go ahead. Yellow is like a slow down or a check-in. Maybe like don't stop what you're doing, but adapt. Maybe let's just like change something. Or if you're wearing it in a band setting, like at a party or something, it can mean like just check in, like really use before even touching or coming in any kind of contact. Make sure to use enthusiastic consent. Red is a stop immediately. Like this is not going, end, terminate what's happening.
Terminate, red button. No.
So they can be used as safe words, as words to be used during play to communicate, I'm good, slow down or adapt, change or check in, and stop immediately. And as I kind of mentioned, that I've seen them commonly at play parties and spaces to communicate, like if it's okay to approach or to have contact, or to use like different degrees of consent, with red being like, I'm not interested, I'm just looking, I'm just here, to hang, so don't even approach. There was something else I was going to say about that, but I've already forgotten. Anyway.
What I was going to say is I do like that approach, because I think for some of us, we don't all work in binaries. And a
Yeah.
yes and a no is very complex for us to understand. Also, some people have negative connotations with the word no from childhood trauma. So actually having a different word for no and having that scale saying, oh, I'm not 100% comfortable. Can we just change this? But I don't want to stop. Do you mean? And that some people, and that's very hard to explain in a binary yes or no system, that consent is often talked about at school and during, like growing up. It's very much like yes or no. But then sometimes you might be like, yes, I want to be pissed on, but I only want to be pissed on here. Do you mean? And I think the traffic light system really helps with people expressing themselves more freely and allowing them to have more conversations away from that binary, which I think some people don't always associate with.
Yeah, I think they work for certain types of play. I
Yeah.
personally, because like what you're describing within the binary, like I think yellow, a lot of times people do, I think, in the binary and they really just want it to change in some way,
Yeah.
not to for it to stop. So I think you're hitting on something there. But I really prefer to know what that thing is, like
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
back to like the getting specific. And and there's ways of integrating. I mean, for me, because when I'm doing like play with pups or subs or boys, is I actually, if I don't feel like if I've not played with them before or we don't have a ton of experience, like we've only played maybe like once or something, I integrate what being a good boy is. Like I define what being a good boy is. And I'll be like in the kind of like more dominant headspace and energy, and I'll be like, you know what a good boy does and what make me really happy is if you communicate. Like, what I mean? I really make it clear
Yeah.
to make it as easy as possible where they don't feel like they're failing or doing something wrong by communicating, where they actually get rewarded for communicating and saying no or saying that they want something to change. And that I think is really helpful to like integrate into the process where the things that are typically seen as negatives, because I'm also very much about not shaming in this space. Like when I play with bottoms and they're like dirty and they go into these shame spirals, and I'm just like, girl, it's fine. Like, like we're gonna
Yeah.
figure this out. Like, let's go to the shower. If you're a shitty mess, I'm gonna fuck you in the shower and we're gonna do this. And I just like feel like it's such a vulnerable thing that we're putting ourselves through. And the more things I can do as a partner to validate. So it's kind of like improv, like yes and.
Yeah.
Like, so this is going wrong. And we're gonna change this. you know, or this is not going exactly as
Yeah.
expected. Yes, and we'll do this other thing instead. It doesn't have to be stop, start in that
I,
way.
I like that because I think that's what I was trying to get at, because that yellow for me is often an and. For me, it's like
Yeah.
yes and no and. Do you mean? I've always used yellow as my and situation. So I'd go yellow and then I'll say, oh, could we do this instead? Do you mean I'm happy, but could we do this? And I think that's what isn't taught, do you mean, at school and isn't well educated is yes, but, or yes and, or no, but, or no and. Do you mean we just don't finish the conversation and we don't continue that communication. We just go bang. And I think that's where sometimes the communication fails, is communication. And I think communication, really consent is communication, isn't it? It's a big aspect. Communication is, consent is key in communication and communication is key in consent. Do you mean they work mutually, where we work mutually together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to throw in something else in that, which is agency. Because
Yeah.
if you have a really reductive, simple model of consent, you're actually limiting your ability to have agency in the play that you're doing. Like if it's just like yes or no or go or stop, that's like so limiting, like to like what your actual desires, the reason you're there, what you want to feel and experience. The more words, the better. The more articulate, there's like a literacy to this, and the more articulate someone can be about their experience, the more agency they're allowing themselves to have. And the same applies to like people who say like, oh, I don't want to ruin the mood. And it's like, well, you're actually removing agency from yourself and the other person by limiting your ability to communicate about what's happening in a healthy way, like in a way that's not going to lead you later being like, oh, maybe I should have done that. Oh, maybe this didn't go well. Or I might have done something bad or something bad happened to me. And so thinking in terms of like what gives you the most freedom and accessibility to have the kind of play and fun that you want is, you know, that's what consent is there to do. It's actually to promote more play rather than limit, which I think people often think of consent as like a limiting, which it is. It's a limitation, like a boundary. But boundaries also allow us to thrive. You know, if we didn't have boundaries, it'd be like this conversation, like just going all over the place from me. But boundaries are helpful.
Yeah. I just wanted to get on before there's a bit that I'm about to get onto the last point I want to get onto, but I just wanted to cover the informed aspect. We talked about RAC and BRIC. So there is SSC, so safe, sane, and consensual. For me, I think that's a bit outdated personally. I still see it go around, but the word sane, it doesn't connect with me, and I feel it's quite ableistic in some sense. Like, what do you class as sane? And it comes from a very neurotypical mindset. And I've had SSC used against me because I don't think the way someone else does, and they don't think that's their level of sane. So for me, it's a redundant term. Let's just leave it as that one. But we've got RAC and PRIC, so risk aware consensual kink. And then what I think is the best one personally is personal responsibility informed consensual kink.
Yes.
And for me, it goes back to agencies, that we've both got agency over the scene. You've got agency, I've got agency. That's our personal responsibility. We're informed of what we're doing. It's consensual, and we're doing an activity. I don't know if you want to chip in and say anything, your perspective on it.
No, I mean, you summed it up well, for sure. I think just saying that agency is all parties involved.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all about empowerment for me. And that's not a part of the acronym, but I think they relate to like we use these terms in these acronyms and these practices in order, like I said, to have, agency, in order to like have these experiences. But if I'm going to be a sub, I want to be a sub because it empowers me in a way. It might look degrading. I might be humiliated. I might go through all this stuff, but it's erotically charged. I leave it feeling empowered. And for me, all of the play I participate in is about that kind of sense of empowerment. And so to not like to just connect that to like the agency, the personal responsibility component, that we have agency. If the experience isn't leading to a sense of empowerment and joy, then there's something inherently wrong, maybe with what's happening. But that's my own perspective.
Yeah.
But I think PRIC is a good one. Regarding like I think SSC is a little outdated because it's very abstract. But it's something to, with the informed process, to like, I'm not going to play with someone who I feel like is being erratic, whether that's they are on drugs or they're being like going through like a mental situation, or even if they're maybe not, there's nothing wrong, but I'm not able to read them. Like that for me is like something I have to pay attention to. Like that might be a norm baseline for that person, but if I'm unable to like read the scenario and the language isn't successful, then that's something I take into consideration, but I wouldn't by any means reference that as sane.
Yeah. It's on the freely given aspect, but the word sane just has negative connotations for me. Yeah, I think it does for a lot. What about RAC? Because I like RAC because it does risk aware, not safe. And that goes back to our previous conversations. And I think risk aware is very good, but I think sometimes there's pressure on the dom to be risk aware, and the submissive isn't always got that risk awareness. There's pressure on one party to be risk aware. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that's prevalent. I mean, it even applies in like the example I gave a little while ago with just kind of normal penetrative sex, if someone's like pulling away, and well, I'm aware that their body is doing like, sure, the communication to me is the body is doing something, but I could also sense that there is hurt, like there's damage being done,
Yeah.
whether the person wants that to be happening or not. But that also has to be communicated, you know?
Yeah.
And so I do feel like dominance is a lot of responsibility for risk, the relationship of risk, but I don't think it's completely 100% the dominance to hold. Like I said, it's an agency and empowerment exercise.
Yeah.
Um, but this is why I really appreciate people who've not done like lots of scene play or dynamic play to go to parties. I think people think of like play parties as, oh, these like slutty faggots are going to these parties just to fuck each other a bunch and whatever. And sure, that
Which we do. Yeah, we do.
exactly. Yeah, of course, but the social context of being in a sexually or kink positive social space is a lot safer it can be a lot safer. I don't want to say it always is, but those contexts can provide skills that are needed. There's only so much of like, I've seen it online, and now I want to do it. Like there's a big jump there, Like if
Yeah.
someone's like, I've seen this on X for like tons of people doing it. Now I want to go do it. And then you meet up with someone who you maybe don't know, maybe know a little bit. But these social spaces where sex and kink positivity exists are so crucially important, I think, to the health and education because they need to be enacted at some level. Like at both my parties, Vanguard and Unleashed, we do demo 101s, which are interactive demos with people who lead people through mini scenes in different types of play. And that has become like a really popular and crucial part of like what the party experience is, so that people can learn what it looks like by someone who's been there and done it, what it looks like to do a pickup negotiation, to execute a scene, and what like brief aftercare looks like in order to get the experience of what it feels like to be in it. But with people who are trained, who know what they're talking about, and have some level of expertise. And there's a framework to be like, if something's going awry, there's producers, there's dungeon monitors, there are people who are available to do that. And I think that is so important in exploration. Like community, like, we've talked about community in all of these ways, like, and, we come, at least I am very much involved with like organizational kind of components and producing, but community can also look like that, like being in shared sex spaces, being in shared kink spaces that are provided for that. So risk aware, that was just my little push for play parties within the context.
Go
of
play
risk
parties. Give me a G, give me an O, give me a P.
Oh God, give you a G and a P. Oh, where are we getting that?
Yikes.
Oh God. Oh.
But yeah, because it allows someone to have the skill to when they start negotiating with whoever they're playing with, and particularly if they're submissive looking for a dom, to know more of how their body is going to respond. Because what you think, who we are in our heads and what our fantasies are not always embodied within like our physical being. And so those things are kind of happening. It's important to be in touch with both aspects of self in that way, and to have a literacy to be able to communicate with your partner.
That goes really well. I was just about to say, this is the last bit, was how does our approach as a kink and fetish community, how would that help the rest of the world? And I think you really touched on it there, is that one is there's a lot of support in consent. And I think that's lacking from the rest of the world, and that we've got these spaces to share experience and help educate. And we're same with this podcast, we're helping educate people through consent. And that's not available really to the rest of the world all the time. We've talked about agency, that we've got this developed sense of agency through consent, and we develop greater communication skills through consent because we've got to have these deeper conversations. I think we have a better understanding of communication and how to have those difficult topics. I know we talked earlier that we need to have more of them, but I think through consent, we do have a better ability to have these harder conversations.
I absolutely agree. And I think something that's more foundational that consent allows and what the kink community can provide through these frameworks is that being able to discuss something, this is more psychology, is
Yeah.
removing the shame of it. Like
Yeah.
I do see a relationship to when there's shame attached, people find it harder to practice healthy consent because they're ashamed of even talking about what their experience and what their desires are. And I think that alone, like just being able to create frameworks that people can utilize that force them to wrestle with the shame that they have about any kind of practice that they might want to participate in, I think would change the world over 20 times. Yeah.
Let's hope the next pillion has a consensual aspect to it. We'll
If
just
it's
do a
gonna
little
happen,
callback
we've got to
there.
make it.
Oh, okay. Let's go make something. No, I'm already doing the podcast, not another one. But I don't know, Dax or Chipper, if there's anything you want to add on consent, because I want you to keep it brief. I want to keep it very snappy. I want to keep it so if someone could take something away, there's these quick bits. But I don't know if there's anyone wanting to say anything else.
I think we got through a lot. Yeah.
Oh, I'm doing well at this deviant download. No one asks questions at the end. I don't know if it's a good thing or... Well, obviously, if you want to ask a question, you can ask online. It's better to ask it underneath the educational post, but you can DM us. Obviously, if you've got any questions about consent, I'm sure Chipper would happily message. If they message you, that you'd happily have a chat with them about it. But yeah, you can always DM us, DM Chipper, write a comment on the post. If you write a comment, I always find comments are better than DMing, because if you ask the question, there's probably someone else who wants to ask that question, but it's too, like we're talking about, too ashamed to ask it. So ask it. Don't be ashamed of asking it. Ask it because it might help someone else. So that's my little push on commenting. With that, I'm going to hand over to Dax for the Dax's Dice.
Woo. All right.
All right.
You slags know the score. So roll it, own it, share it. The dice don't judge, and neither do we. How lucky are you feeling today, Chipper?
I'm always feeling lucky.
Ooh, that's what I like to hear. All right, are you ready for your roll?
Go for it.
Ooh, you get a 4. Oh, well, here we go. That's actually kind of topical. What's a piece of advice you'd give to someone new to kink?
I would tell them to go to events, meet people, find the people that, well, I say this a lot regularly, go where the love is. Find people you trust, who you can build a connection with, and do your homework. Read up on the kink of interest, whether that's literally reading or just like watching things or consuming content. It can be pleasurable and informative.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty solid advice.
By the time the
I'm trying to
episode...
be short and snappy. We're already,
No, that was very short. Thank you very much. I think sometimes just giving those little bits of advice are really important for our community. There's a lot of information out there, and sometimes just having short little bits for people to expand on is really great. So before you go, you already promoted yourself at the start, but let's promote you again. Go on, tell us your socials, tell us anywhere to go to find you.
How do you find Chipper? Well, you follow Chipper. Instagram, TikTok, Linktree, X, Blue Sky, though I've not been posting much there. It's all at Follow Chipper. So you can find me on any of those sources and reach out to me. I am happy to chat with people. And all of my events that I promote and do, as well as any resources I have, will be on my Linktree. So that's kind of like my acting website.
So anyway, we've been the Deviant Duo with me, Quincy.
And me, Dax.
And I've been Chipper.
Our lovely guest. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.